Shadow Chancellor Ed Balls joins me now from Swindon, and a very good afternoon to you, Shadow Chancellor. I want to ask you, first of all, Mr. Balls, in economic terms, how would you define austerity? Well, thinking time there. Can you hear me, Mr. Balls?
Just lost this. I'm sorry, Dale, we just lost the sound there. Are you back now with us?
Good. I just wanted to start with the broad point about everyone's spending plans. How would you define austerity?
I think austerity is the view that deeper spending cuts deliver you stronger growth and rising living standards and get the deficit down. It's what George Osborne tried in 2010, and it failed. He didn't manage to balance the books. For 5 years, wages have not kept pace with prices, and a continuing view that even deeper spending cuts. George Osborne is now saying he wants deeper spending cuts in the next 3 years than in the last 5. And I think that's going to be bad for our economy, bad for jobs, bad for public services.
Okay.
I think it will end up with a rise in VAT and cuts to our National Health Service.
Well, it's interesting with your economic background, your definition there of austerity. This is from the Financial Times lexicon. Austerity measures refer to measures taken by governments to shrink their growing budget deficits, including spending cuts, tax increases, or a mixture of both. That's what you're going to do.
Well, look, I'm for balancing the books in the next Parliament. I want to cut the deficit.
Well, that's austerity then.
Every year. But I think austerity... Well, it's very different from the definition I just gave you, because I think of austerity as believing if you shrink the size of the state with cuts in public spending, deeper cuts, that will make things better, and that clearly hasn't worked. Our contrast on the deficit is a balanced plan. We say there'll be some sensible spending cuts in non-protected areas. We'll get more people into better jobs with rising wages, and we'll have some tax increases for those on the highest incomes. For example, putting the top rate of income tax back up to 50p for those owning over £150,000.
So just to be clear,
I
Mr.
think that's
Balls,
a balanced
okay,
plan, and it contrasts to George Osborne's austerity.
But it's not an austerity plan, in spite of that being the economic definition of austerity, an attempt to get your budget back into surplus, which you've said you will do through spending cuts and tax increases. That's Labour's plan, is it not?
Well, look, I worked for the Financial Times for 4 years, and I obviously respect the FT very greatly, but I'm not sure whether they've got a monopoly on economic terms and wisdom. If you're saying to me austerity means getting the budget deficit down, well, I would say to you, I want to get the budget deficit down, but I don't think that's the definition of austerity. And the definition of austerity was doing it through only deep spending cuts, shrinking the size of the state, and it's worked pretty badly under George Osborne. So I reject Tory austerity and instead want a balanced plan to get the deficit down in a fair way.
Right, OK, we can dance on the head of a pin here, can't we? But you want to get, you've signed up to the Budget Responsibility Charter.
I think it's a bit...
And as the IFS has described, in all the parties, there are big holes in your plans about how you're going to do this. Let's say you've got to find this £30 billion. Given the tax cuts you've already announced, are already, it seems, earmarked for so many different projects, where is it going to come from?
Well, look, the Institute for Fiscal Studies paper yesterday totally dismantled David Cameron's made-up figures and allegations against Labour on 2 grounds. First of all, the IFS makes it clear we've not signed up to 30 billion cuts by 2018, as George Osborne and David Cameron say. That is not what the fiscal charter we voted for says at all. And secondly, we've not signed up to a plan to do it 50-50 spending cuts and tax increases. So on both grounds,
what is the proportion?
They were wrong. David Cameron's £3,000 charge is entirely made up.
What is the proportion of spending cuts and tax rises?
Well, as I said to you a moment ago, there's 3 elements you need. It's both about cuts to unprotected spending, which we will make, and it's about fair tax rises at the top for those on the highest incomes. And thirdly, and crucially, it's whether or not economic growth delivers rising wages, which brings in the tax revenues from people working and doing well. And the reason why George Osborne has failed in this Parliament to balance the books is precisely because he's been so woeful at bringing in the tax revenues. But we're talking about your plans, Mr. Balls. People are worse off. Working people are worse off than they were in 2010.
But people want to know more about your plans, and you've said there is a three-pronged approach. So is it 33%, 33%, 33%?
Well, what we will do when we are in government is make a budget which will deliver our objectives to get the deficit down every year, to balance the books by the end of the Parliament, or sooner if we can, and reduce the national debt. But because it will depend... Well, I've just explained to you that, first of all, there will be some spending cuts in unprotected areas. Our zero-based review has set out 11 different reports identifying the cuts. I can go through all of them with you if you like. Secondly, we've made decisions on the top rate of income tax, on the winter allowance, on capping child benefit for 1%. You know that every promise we've made to change things is costed and paid for, but then, not on the top rate, not the winter allowance, not the child benefit.
Are those changes, are those increases, are they for deficit reduction, or are they not for a jobs guarantee, for building 200,000 extra houses and to fund the NHS? They're already spent.
Well, no, actually, but it's really helpful to be able to set this out. The top rate of tax increase, the winter allowance cut for those on pensions over £42,000, and the 1% cap on child benefit all go to deficit reduction. But it is also the case, we've said, we'll have a mansion tax and a tobacco levy to spend £2.5 billion a year more on the NHS. We'll raise the bank bonus tax to guarantee jobs for young people, raise the bank levy so that we can have free childcare at 25 hours for working parents. The differences between my plans and the Tory plans is all the promises to do more I've made are costed and paid for. There's no commitments in my manifesto which are paid for by additional borrowing or which are unfunded. But I've also got a deficit reduction plan which is based upon, as I said, the winter allowance, child benefit cap, top rate of tax, a series of cuts to public spending, and what happens to growth and wages. If we can increase the underlying growth rate of our economy by just 0.2%, that gets the deficit down by £15 billion a year by 2020. And I don't know where we will be later in the year on the OBR forecast, but I am hopeful that we will have a plan for growth and living standards, our apprenticeship guarantee, our business investment bank, which can get beyond the woefully weak and poor performance on productivity and investment we've seen.
All right. Last question on this immigration mug that Labour's got out. One of your pledges there. Chuka Umunna, the man you shared the platform with today, says he won't be buying one. Diane Abbott says she won't. Have you got one?
I've not got one, but I ought to buy one and have it in my constituency campaign office, because it's a very, very important pledge for us to make. We're not going to shut the borders. We're not going to walk away from Europe. We need skilled people coming to our country, but there's got to be tough controls on immigration, and you've got to know that people who come here contribute before they get any benefit. So we're saying 2 years for any unemployment benefit or tax credits, and we're also going to stop migrant workers undercutting the wages of workers here in the UK. Tough controls, it's a pledge from us, it's on the mug, and I'm hoping after the general election I can do a toast in that mug as we get on and change Britain for the better, for the future. David Cameron and George Osborne today, they're telling people that they're better off than they were in 2010.
Well, you won't be able to do that toast with Chuka Umunna.
They're completely out of touch, and it will take a Labour government to change it.
All right, Shadow Chancellor, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed, Ed Balls there.